Hey there. Have you ever found yourself reading the book of Proverbs and wondering who is this woman of folly we read about? Or what does it mean to be a Proverbs 31 woman? Well, if you're looking to get answers to some of those questions, then you're in the right place. So let's begin. Hi, I'm Kinsey, and here at the Joyride with Jesus Ministry, it's our hope to encourage others to develop a positive sense of self-worth and to build a community of people desiring to seek out their God-given purpose. And so today we will be covering the book of Proverbs, what it's all about, why it's relevant to our everyday life, and sharing some resources to help go deeper and study throughout this book. So, as with anything we read, whether it's the Bible, an article, movie description, or whatever it is, it's always important to look for those little details to gain a better understanding of context prior to engaging. And so that leads us to ask, well, what is a proverb? Who wrote it? What type of book is Proverbs? And so the first question we'll cover is, what exactly is a proverb? So probably the best definition that I found regarding what a proverb is came from gotquestions.org. It defined a biblical proverb as being a short saying that expresses a general truth for practical godly living. Essentially, these are expressions concerning practical wisdom through the use of example, warning, or precept. And Proverbs by nature deal with general truths, but keep in mind they are not meant to cover every conceivable situation that comes about. And so due to the wide range in which Proverbs can be applied, it's very important to take our time in studying them rather than taking them at face value for what they could mean. And that ultimately goes for just anything in life, because as humans, we tend to want to rush into just the first thing that pops into mind. And when it comes to, especially when it comes to the Bible and understanding it and applying it to life, it's just so important to take our time with it to ensure that we are listening for God's still small voice and applying it appropriately to whatever season of life we are in. And while there are some that ultimately always apply, while in other instances it depends on the situation, and that's where the need for godly wisdom and discerning when to appropriately apply them comes in. And the Moody commentary gives a great example of what's meant by this on page 884 in the structure and genre section of the Proverbs overview that it provides. If you'd like to look into that commentary, you can find the Amazon affiliate link for that resource, as well as all other resources used for the making of this video in the description box. And so that leads us into the next question of what type of book is Proverbs. So in the Bible, you've got what's known as the wisdom literature books, which are also referred to as the books of poetry. And the book of Proverbs is the third out of 5 poetical books throughout the Old Testament. And the other books within this category include the book of Job, Psalms, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon. Some other Bibles refer to it as the Song of Songs. And now to authorship and the estimated timeline. While there are a handful of contributors for authorship, it's important to note that the larger part of the book is ascribed to King Solomon. In fact, according to the Moody commentary, essentially each section or chapter throughout the book of Proverbs has a direct connection to Solomon in some way, with the exception of chapters 30 and 31, which leads to the question of why is that? So, for chapters 1 through 24, they're dated to be written around the time of Solomon, which is roughly 950 BC. And then you've got chapters 29 through 25, which are estimated to be around the time of Hezekiah, which would roughly be around 716 to 687 BC. And from what we know, there's some indication as to who wrote chapters 30 and 31, and the possibility of these chapters being dated to the time of Hezekiah has been debated. But based on the research that I've done, it suggests that there's no clear indication or evidence as to when the final edits were actually made. So in that instance, it's ultimately better to leave it alone until something suggests otherwise, especially when it comes to the Bible. Like, it's better, like, if we don't know for certain when a specific book or chapter was written, it's better just to leave it alone, because that ultimately can lead to confusion if we're not certain. And so now that we have some of the basics, like, of the context, let's go a little bit deeper into what the book of Proverbs is all about. So the book as a whole emphasizes godly wisdom, the kind that can only be found in the fear of God. And it clearly states in chapter 1, verses 1 through 7, that the overarching purpose, per se, is to describe and instill God's people with wisdom. And we actually see the word wisdom show up 37 times throughout the book of Proverbs. So that right there tells us just how important the emphasis of wisdom is throughout this book. And keep in mind that the fear of God concept is completely different from the fear of man concept. And we will essentially look into differentiating the two in another video, but for now, just know that the fear of man typically stems from our human desire to be accepted, which leads to our actions being based around what other people think, say, and do, which in turn compromises our integrity and our walk with God. While on the other hand, the fear of God is how we obtain the wisdom and knowledge to know right from wrong. And it's the kind of fear that teaches us respect and to be obedient to God's will for our lives and to take responsibility for our actions. And in Proverbs chapter 1, verse 8 through chapter 9, verse 18, we are introduced to 13 different lessons on wisdom. And simply for the sake of time, I'm simply going to list off what they are. And anyone that's interested in going a little deeper with each of these lessons, you can find a brief description on each of these lessons in the Tyndale Bible Dictionary as a good starting point to study them further. And I will go slow with listing these off for anybody that just wants to jot them down. And so first, for starters, lesson 1 touches on avoiding evil companions. And this is touched on in chapter 1, verse 8 through 33. Lesson 2 touches on the rewards of wisdom. And this is found in chapter 2, verses 1 through 22. Lesson 3 is the rewards of complete trust in God. And that's chapter 3, verses 1 through 10. And lesson 4 is the need for discipline. and that's chapter 3, verses 11 through 20. You still with me? Because we got more. Lesson 5, wisdom and common sense. That's chapter 3, verses 21 through 35. Lesson 6 is on determination, and that's chapter 4, verses 1 through 9. Lesson 7 is the straight path, which is chapter 4, verses 10 through 19. Lesson 8 is pursuing righteousness and avoiding evil. That's chapter 4, verses 20 through 27. Lesson 9 is on sexual purity. That's chapter 5, verses 1 through 23. Hang with me, we're almost there. Lesson 10 is the things God hates. That's chapter 6, verses 1 through 19. Lesson 11, illicit sexual relationships. That's chapter 6, verses 20 through 35. Lesson 12 is the wiles of the prostitute, and that's chapter 7, verses 1 through 27. And lastly, lesson 13 touches on wisdom's direct appeal, and that's chapter 8, verse 1 through chapter 9, verse 18. Whew. Got it? Let's continue. If you pay close attention throughout the book of Proverbs, you'll see that two different women are depicted throughout Proverbs. Woman number 1 personifies the word for God's wisdom, and woman number 2 is described as the woman of folly, or in other words, the woman who is not following God's wisdom. And another way to look at it is that wisdom points to God, which leads to eternal life, and folly points to the creation of idols or things of the world, which leads to eternal death, which leaves us with a question that we are ultimately faced with, which is, which will you follow, wisdom or folly, God or the world? Because you cannot have both. And this essentially leads to the concept that Proverbs connects to the law of Moses that we read about. And although keep in mind that the key difference is that the law and prophets focus more on the covenant people and demonstrating to the world what restored humanity could look like, while Proverbs depicts what restoration should look like within our behaviors and personal character from one day to the next. And a key theme or lesson throughout Proverbs is understanding that the pursuit of an intimate relationship with God and a life lived that honors Him does not happen overnight. It requires us to make a life-altering choice for the better, to seek after God, to study His Word, to pursue His will, not our own, and be disciplined enough to do it. So simply put, seeking God's wisdom and guidance as described in the book of Proverbs. And take time in making decisions. Seek out godly discernment in the process, for God does provide us with people and resources we need for every season. But we are called to do our part in trusting Him and being spiritually sound-minded to recognize what is of God and what's of the enemy. So that's another ultimate key lesson in the book of Proverbs. And there are a variety of different character types covered throughout Proverbs, but we're just going to touch on the three obvious or main character types, And those are the wise, the fool, and the simple. The wise character type is one who embraces God's covenant and learns the skill of living out the covenant in everyday situations. And the fool is someone who is steadily opposed to God's covenant, resists the offer of forgiveness found in the covenant, and is dangerous in their influence and causes grief to their parents. But keep in mind, they are not beyond hope. And then the simple is someone who is not committed to wisdom or folly. They're easily misled and does not apply oneself to the discipline needed to gain and grow in wisdom. And essentially, the way the book of Proverbs is written, it appears as though the transmission of wisdom all throughout the book is essentially as if a father is addressing his son with life lessons, perhaps maybe by his own experiences. And this is where we get the idea of a Proverbs 31 woman, because the final chapter, it shifts as if a mother is passing on wisdom to her son on what to look for in a woman of God or a godly wife. And just a disclaimer to anyone listening, the idea of a Proverbs 31 woman is certainly a topic that I intend to pray over and cover in a later video. But keep in mind, just to always remember that it's okay to get something wrong, and it's okay if your story looks different from someone else's. No two people are going to be entirely the same. Even when looking upon twins, like, they might be identical twins genetically, but personality wise and their interest, it's going to be completely different. So just keep that in mind. Like, no two people are going to be exactly the same. And please know that you do not have to aim for perfection. And it's my hope that you can be at peace with who God created you to be. As God's creation, we are called to live out His word, but we are indeed human. And we fall short on occasion. And just want to encourage you to faithfully pray for God's guidance on how to live out His word from one season to the next for your life specifically. And if you find yourself falling into that comparison trap, might I encourage you to step away from whatever is causing you to go that route. If it's someone's Facebook post, if you find yourself comparing your life to what you see someone posting on social media, perhaps maybe it might be in your best interest to back away from following that person and overly engaging with them. Because while we are called to seek after God's will and to pursue His words, like, that may not be helping. An example of what this might look like is like of applying God's word to your life from one season to the next is Proverbs 31 verse 15. The ESV translation words it as, "She rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household and portions for her maiden." And this is where it's always important to consider the context of the passage you're reading and ask God for guidance on what this verse is meant to look like in your life, as it may not be feasible for everybody to get up at 5 a.m. and go to bed at 9 p.m. Like, that might be how one individual perceives this verse, but that may not be feasible for you for whatever season of life you're in, or just even throughout your entire life. It may not be like what God is calling you to do. So just keep that in mind, and because the way a passage applies to your life today may look completely different to how it's meant to be applied 2 years from now. And so that leads us into a few application questions that I found in the ESV Study Bible on how to, like, essentially to help guide our study throughout the book of Proverbs. And so the first application question that it gave is, what virtue does this proverb commend? Application question number 2, what vice does it hold for disapproval? And application question 3 is, what value does it affirm? And I truly hope you have benefited from this information in some way. And please let me know in the comments how this has helped you and how I can be praying for you in regard to resources. I don't have them all with me, but I am going to show you a couple that I have just in reach. So for starters, I did use the ESV Study Bible, the Moody Commentary, the Tyndale Bible Dictionary, the Bible Knowledge Commentary, and then there's a couple online resources. The first one is gotquestions.org, which I just want to point out that gotquestions.org, along with Bible Hub, are great resources, especially when traveling. If you may not want to take like a bunch of like physical commentaries and stuff with you, and you don't want to be weighed down by it. And then there's always the Bible Project as well. You can download their app, and they have quite a few different like courses and just animated like overview videos for each book of the Bible that you can watch. And then the resource that I am going to show you, I have not personally done either of these yet, but they are on my list now that I've got a Proverbs overview. There's all kinds of these. This first one is an 8-session Bible study called Proverbs Real Wisdom for Real Life, made by the Good Book Guide, and it's just like really nifty. It's got like a talk about section, and investigate, apply, prayer points, getting personal, stuff like that you can look into. And the great thing about these is that, like, even though it says 8-session like weekly studies, you can ultimately go at it at your own pace. And if you're anything like me, you may struggle with doing things that are intended to be done within a certain time frame. And with these, there's really no rush to get through them. And then the other one is a 12-week Proverbs. It's made by Knowing the Bible series. And again, with this one, even though it says 12 weeks, like, you can easily go through it on your own. And the Knowing the Bible series has just more application type questions with it. And it gives you like certain passages. They both give like certain passages to read. So if you want to look into any of these resources used or these study guides, please check out the description box, and they are all right there for you in the Amazon affiliate link. Please know that I by no means am here to try to pitch anything. I am simply here to help each and every one of you, including myself, go deeper in studying the Bible and just embracing our God-given purposes in life and tying scripture into that. And so, like, I by no means am trying to sell anything, just sharing the resources that I've used in the midst of each of these videos or just in my own study. But also know that when you order any of these resources through using the links provided, it does help fund the ministry to do various projects. And so it is much appreciated when you order from those links, but by no means like required at all. So again, just thank you for watching and thank you for tuning in. And if you made it here to the end, let us know how this video has helped you. Let us know how we can pray for you. If you like more videos like this, what topics you'd like for us to cover, and we'll get on that in any way that I can, and we'll pray over them. God bless each and every one of you, and as always, remember that you are amazing, you have a purpose, and you are loved, and don't ever be afraid to embrace your joyride with Jesus. See you guys.